Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you to all of you for being here today to celebrate the life of this great man, Alan Harler. My name is Dominic Dioro, and I am honored to be the 14th Artistic Director of the Mendelssohn Chorus of Philadelphia. And in many ways, my life would not be possible without this man, even though I did not meet him until much later in my career. Some of you, I've told this before, others I have not. I direct the contemporary vocal ensemble at Indiana University, an ensemble called Notice now. And Alan Harler founded that ensemble in 1980 when he was on the faculty at Indiana University. And then, of course, I am now honored to be artistic director of this ensemble. So in many ways, my career would not have been possible in the way it is now without his legacy. And his legacy is what I wanted to reflect on with you today, because I knew of Alan Harler before I came and auditioned for this role. I knew of him for many years because of his role in Chorus America. I served on the board of that organization from 2015 to 2018, and almost instantly when I got there, I started hearing his name all around. And I remember our organization hosted the conference in 2019 as well, and Alan Harler was honored during that event as well because of his longtime contributions to choral music at large. And in fact, the Mendelssohn Chorus is known nationally and internationally because of, in many ways, the innovations he had during his time as artistic director, especially the legacy of 58 commissions that he left behind and the 27 years of long risk-taking adventures. So that legacy is sort of well known in the profession because of the work he did here, not only, of course, at Mendelssohn, but also at Temple, and then with the other organizations and institutions he was with throughout his life. And that legacy is wonderful. It is professional. It is beautiful. It is artistic. But there's another legacy that he left, and that legacy is personal. And that legacy is reflected in you here today, the lives he touched, the hearts he moved. Right? I am honored to be following in his footsteps in so many ways. And I am honored today to be seeing so many of you and hearing stories about this man who, from everything I could tell, was kind, humble, generous of spirit and heart, humorous, right? And exacting in rehearsal, right? There was no laxing of his musical standards because his heart was golden and large. Right, so I thank you for being here today on behalf of the Mendelssohn Chorus, and I thank you for being here to celebrate his life. Will you please join me now in also welcoming our former board chair, Ellie Elkinton.
Good afternoon. I am Ellie Elkinton, and I had the joy of singing with Alan during the last 17 years of his 27-year tenure with Mendelssohn Chorus. And I had the life-altering honor of serving for 11 of those years as the chair of the Mendelssohn Club board. It was called Mendelssohn Club then. Welcome to all of you, and a special welcome to Chuck Kalick, Alan's partner of 38 years, and his family, and Alan's niece, Becky, and her family from their hometown in Illinois. As the planning committee put together this celebration, it was daunting to consider just how many facets there are of this wonderful man to celebrate. So today is a sampler. We will pay tribute to Alan as a teacher, a visionary, a builder of organizations, a musical scholar, an artistic creator, a colleague, and a friend. Members of the Mendelssohn Chorus, some current singers and a lot of us alumni alike, will bring us a few classical works that we know Alan loved. And we will relive many highlights of Alan's life and career through videos and photos which show some of his non-classical adventures. I would like to share two perspectives on Alan. First, as former board chair, and then a personal one as a close friend during the last few years of his life. In the early 2000s, with gentle nudging from Alan, sorry, I lost my place. The early 2000s, with gentle nudging from Alan, the Mendelssohn Club board transitioned from being a board governed by singers and elected by singers to a board drawn primarily from the larger Philadelphia community. With a wider circle of board members, Alan seemed to gather steam and begin to dream big and bold. He consistently came to board meetings, I must say, fully prepared. He had read and thought about all the advanced materials, and he quietly asked pertinent questions. I learned not to believe him when he said he knew nothing about finances. He could look at a finance committee report and zoom right in on the issues that needed to be explored. He also had the most beguiling way of proposing his supposedly tentative ideas for his next commissioning project. For example, partnering with Leah Stein, who I think is here today, he proposed working with composer Pauline Oliveros, who, we discovered later, never wrote down any music, and whose urban echo would have singers lying on the floor of the rotunda with audience moving around them. Or singers would need to perform David Lang's Civil War battle hymns in the old armory, complete with tanks and a horse. Or in Julia Wolf's Anthracite Fields, singers would sing in the dark, as in a coal mine. And there are pictures of all of these. And there were more. Board members listened carefully to these proposals, had lots of questions, could be skeptical, but they learned to trust that Alan would create a unique and moving masterpiece. Many would say that these last years of his career were his most creative. They were certainly his most out of the box. Yet through it all, he stayed true to his vision and his MO. He believed the old enhances the new, enhances the old, enhances the new, and so on. And as he wrote across the big notebook that he carried everywhere, we take risks, and he did. The other perspective that I want to mention comes from sharing his last 3 years with him and Chuck when they moved to Folkways Retirement Community, where my husband Tom and I live, and where we would run into them almost every day. This gave us a chance to have many wonderful conversations. One time, we were comparing the religious traditions that we had each grown up with and what we believe now as adults. Toward the end of that discussion, Alan said quietly, "I find my faith in my music." That says it all. Even as Alan was slowing down by then, he wanted to be useful to the Folkways community. On the Performing Arts Committee, he was a quiet asset to the deliberations, and yet his modesty persuaded him that he wasn't being helpful there at all. I remain sad that Folkways never got to know the Alan whom most of us knew. Looking back, I see not only a magnificent artist, but pure and simple, a man of tremendous integrity, humility, kindness, depth, and dignity to the end. Alan Harler was a gift.
Good afternoon. My name is John Leonard, and it is an honor to be able to speak today among so many wonderful colleagues and friends as we come together to celebrate the remarkable life of Alan Harler. I count myself blessed to be just one of many students who call Alan Harler our mentor. It is humbling to try to speak on all of our behalves, and I hope that my remarks today reflect how truly transformative it is to be a student of our beloved Mr. Harler. Beginning conductors and vocalists need to find someone who believes in them, a champion. And for me, like so many others, that person was Alan Harler. As a young musician, I sang for Alan for many years in the Mendelssohn Club Chorus and at Temple University, where I was a graduate student in choral conducting. Afterward, I went on to be his apprentice at Mendelssohn, and as many of my fellow school colleagues have noted, Mr. Harler never stopped being your teacher. His steadfast mentorship led me to Indiana University and ultimately back to the Philadelphia area to continue my musical growth with the Mendelssohn Chorus and to be fortunate to lead a choral program of amazing students of my own at the College of New Jersey, who, by the way, know Alan Harler's name because he's there in the room, so present, and so much that I do. The impact that Mr. Harler had on us as a teacher and a mentor is immeasurable. So many of the lessons he instilled in his students from the podium and seminar classes and conducting lessons continue to guide all of us in our work every day. Mr. Harler was meticulous in his musical preparation, was the model of efficiency and productivity in his rehearsals, and was, most importantly, dedicated fully to his students' success. I find it, again, the word is remarkable. He was able to get anything else done considering how generous he was with his time and attention to his students. Alan taught us to listen and respond through his gentleness. He taught us to be diligent through his dedication to score study and musicianship. He taught us to be curious and inquisitive through his adventurous programming. And he taught us to be loving and respectful through his honoring of the composer, of the music, and the musicians and audiences that he performed with and for. As one of my classmates put it recently, Mr. Harler opened doors for you to be your best and never allowed you to become your worst. The result was that he taught us how to be human as conductors, leading with confidence in musicianship as well as with humility, passion, and most importantly, joy. I am fortunate to be the steward of Alan's remarkable library. There are scores from Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and Berlioz, of course, Mendelssohn, to Bernstein, Stravinsky, Lang, Higdon, Clearfield, and so many more. Being able to study these scores and look at Alan's insightful markings in the margins is an amazing gift. Alan lives on in these scores and in his notes. You can see him in his attention to detail, the gentleness with which he worked, and the personal preparation he invested in that maintained his artistry and guided him as he worked with his musicians, humbly, with dignity, and with great talent. When I think of Mr. Harler, my mentor and my friend, I do not feel sorrow. I find joy and peacefulness. I am comforted to know that every time I or any of my fellow students of Mr. Harler open a score, select repertoire, or work with our choirs, Alan is right there, smiling at us and gently guiding us, and he always will be.
He was my main teacher of choral conducting when I was the master's student at Temple, and he was responsible for who I am right now.
Alan was always the first person I would go to for advice, so working with a choir, be it at church, the youth choirs I'm working with now, repertoire decisions about ensemble, I would always go to him, and he was so generous in listening and so wise.
He was a teacher who wouldn't force his students how to do things. He would be the one to always understand what the strengths are and the weaknesses are, and then let them really dig into the strengths and also the need. You know, he will be the one to just encourage his students to just keep pursuing what they want to pursue. And in my case, you know, my passion is Bach.
Alan can identify without, I mean, it seems like with no effort, identify exactly what the student needs to move beyond some stage that he or she may be in and help them on the spot to fix it.
I think the lesson I most needed to learn was to open my mind to new repertoire, especially. Anyone who knows Alan would know that he was always stretching boundaries, and he did that with us, his students, as well.
He taught me how to appreciate newer music and kind of helped me listen to both of them, the classics and the new music, differently. And I kind of felt like I've grown as, you know, a listener and a musician. And that's something that I've always be grateful forever.
I learned from him kindness and patience. So when I was in concert choir, he was so kind and so patient with everybody, and it made everybody want to learn more.
His personality is one that just immediately connects with you and puts you at ease and makes you feel really comfortable. And that in itself is just inspiration to do everything that you can for him.
I mean, he was just so genuinely caring. I mean, he is that way with everyone. And but for his students, you know, he really cared about us, and he cared about our progress and our growth as musicians, and cared that we would find a place in the world. So
he watched me as a teenager grow from college years, post-college, graduate school, get married, have children. He was there for every aspect of my life.
You don't have to know him for a very long time to see his kindness and gentle spirit. He's very open, he's very honest. You can see it in his eyes, you can see it in the way that he conducts himself and just his presence.
I realized it was such a gift to have been one of his master students, and you know, he's missed.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Pinzer, longtime singer and formerly president of Mendelssohn Chorus, Philadelphia. It's no exaggeration to say that without Alan Harler, there would be no Mendelssohn Chorus of Philadelphia. In fact, there would have been no Mendelssohn Club had it not been for Alan. Permit me to set the scene, although I will dwell not too much on the painful details. In 1978, Tamara Brooks was hired as Mendelssohn Club's music director. She was a polarizing figure in the city's musical scene, an inspiring and gifted musician, but someone unwilling to compromise her artistic principles for the sake of politics. This inflexibility had several important consequences, the most serious of which was a rift with the Philadelphia Orchestra. As the orchestra stopped inviting us to sing, our membership continued to dwindle. In 1987, Tamara resigned, and our season consisted of auditioning 3 guest conductors, one for each of our concerts that year. When neither of these was asked to be our next music director, Mendelssohn Club was basically adrift, with no sense of purpose and no leadership for the upcoming season. At that time, we had no professional staff, and the chorus was being managed by a well-meaning but inexperienced group drawn from our singers. Some of this group had sung with Alan Harler at the Casals Festival in Puerto Rico that June, and were greatly impressed by his musicianship and his personality. One of these people was our president at the time, who offered Alan the position of music director. He accepted, and you see the happy result of this decision all around the church. Membership in the chorus started to increase again, and singers began enjoying coming to rehearsal. Alan immediately began building bridges within the musical community, and eventually Mendelssohn Club was invited to sing with the Philadelphia Orchestra again. He reached out to several ethnic groups within the city, and we collaborated with African American, Latino, Jewish, and Chinese choruses early in Alan's tenure. On these programs, we expanded both our repertoire and our visibility in the city. Alan's ear and ability to obtain the sound he wanted were truly amazing. Early in many seasons, he would have a rehearsal for each section. He would call 4 people up and have them sing together, sometimes taking notes, but usually not. This process was repeated with different groups of 4, and then Alan had the entire section sing together, moving people here and there to find the sound that he wanted. He was similarly exacting with the full chorus, shaping phrases, using dynamics, and wonderful gestures to obtain the sound he wanted. Many of us have mugs with the famous logo, "We Take Risks." His more than 50 works commissioned during his tenure stretched the chorus musically and gave composers a chance to bring their works to a larger audience. His collaborations with artists in other fields, especially dance, or in the case of most of us singers, movement, brought another dimension to the works we performed. Most memorable for me was the Pulitzer Prize-winning Anthracites Fields. Even Alan's choice for his farewell to us was indicative of his vision for Mendelssohn Chorus. Although a beautifully sung and heartfelt Brahms Requiem would have been a lovely way to leave the stage, Alan opted for an intricate work, Turbine, performed outdoors in and around the waterworks behind the Art Museum. Now, the weather did not always cooperate, some of you may remember, but the piece was a love letter from Alan to the city and to the singers who had been with him on his 27-year journey. Finally, I have fond memories of all the Feast of Carols concerts that we gave in this majestic space. To this day, I cannot end the concert without hearing Alan's gentle voice in my mind, wishing the audience and us happy holidays, everyone. Thank you, Alan, for staying true to your vision of the centrality of choral music to our humanity.
There was this integrity, this seriousness about the music because the music demanded it, a seriousness of preparation, a seriousness of standard that he brought into the rehearsal. And there was this unspoken kind of demand, in the kindest way, that, and I remember him saying one time, we were getting a little lax, a little lazy, and I remember him saying, "This is music," and just insisting.
We sang the most out there kinds of things. We sang the most standard kinds of things. He brought enthusiasm to everything equally.
He was also bringing in young singers because he was bringing people from Temple, and that was adding a lot of life to the chorus. He kept on inspiring us. If he had confidence in us, we could do it. That's the way I felt. It's just a matter of time.
This chorus really has a lot of great feelings for the people within it and treasures that sense of community. And that also comes through in the sound. And Alan cultivated that.
His love of people in the choir didn't stop with the music. When we did the St. Luke Passion of Penderecki, that was such a challenge to learn. I didn't have a score. My brother and John, all of us are blind. And Alan got together with Don St. Pierre, who was the accompanist at that time. And I don't know how many hours they must have spent, but they made this recording for us to teach us, for us to learn from and work with for the Penderecki. And it made things so clear.
He cared about people first, and I feel that's something I try to emulate, thinking about the singer who might be struggling the most in the rehearsal. How do they feel, in that rehearsal? How do they feel when they leave? And for him, I think, people wanted to sing for him because of who he was. It was this warmth and this very kind of quiet charisma that was so genuine, that created this atmosphere.
The fall of my first year in '95, we had a concert for the 125th anniversary of Chinatown with several Chinese American choirs. The multicultural experience for us was great, and this went into whole other communities that we had not reached. It was about sharing these traditions and finding commonality.
It was good to do because it broadened our perspectives on what was happening in the city, on what was happening, on what kinds of music there were, and also the sense of sharing between the different groups, I think, was really powerful.
Yeah, Andrea Clearfield Segala is a good example of the cross-cultural experience for us. We were learning a language we had never heard before. We were singing styles and sounds that we had never sung before. And then she invited Tibetan community to meet with us and show us what they were going to contribute to the performance, and then they were in the performance.
He came in at a time, it was before I joined, but the chorus was not in great shape, artistically, financially, most ways. And Alan brought it back. He made it a real force in the city and a real part of the cultural landscape. He engineered the move to a more professional board that brought in outside people, and that also strengthened Mendelssohn Chorus. But Alan really set a lot of things in motion that made Mendelssohn Chorus what it is today.
He was very, good at making sure that the structure was in place underneath to allow him to do the kinds of things he wanted to do artistically. It was a sort of amazing transition to go from from a sort of working board of a few singers trying to make everything happen to something much more professional. Alan started that process rolling, and it's done nothing but grow since.
Good afternoon. My name is Marietta Simpson, and I'm going to start off doing a thing that all singers do, and that is talking about me. I was going to try to play it off and say the reason why I'm dressed so humbly this afternoon is to talk about Alan's humble spirit. But in fact, my son-in-law, in between church and my granddaughter's soccer game, locked all of the doors to the house. And so, that really beautiful black ensemble that was so unique and all the wonderful jewelry, and in fact, my beautifully AI-assisted remarks are in my daughter's house in New Jersey. So it was casual Sunday, and so therefore, I do believe Alan would find great joy in the fact that I am here just as I am. But the truth of the matter is, I am so honored and privileged to be here today to talk about my friend and colleague, Alan Harler, who I met as an undergraduate student the year he interviewed and auditioned to become the head of choral activities at Temple University in the year. I always like to tell people I had black hair back then. He was transitioning from Indiana University, and at the time I was like, where in the world is that? I was singing in the laboratory chorus, and he conducted us, and I was so impressed. I remember that he was very clear in his instructions and directions to the choir. He had such positive energy and a calm demeanor, and he was thoroughly knowledgeable about the music that he presented to us. I also remember that I was hopeful that he would get that job and was very glad when he did. Years later, when I would have the opportunity as a professional to work with Alan, I wondered if all of those traits that I was so positive about during his audition were actually true, or if time had positively enhanced those things. But I was so glad that at least one of the things that I had remembered as a young person was actually true, because so many things that I thought I knew as a young person just weren't. But Alan really was that person. He was kind, he was energetic, he had a collaborative spirit, even with me as a professional. I came to know him, and I came to have the opportunity to perform with him on several choral masterworks. And some of the things that I took away from those experiences was that he had a great love of music. He was willing to share that love. He had an understated elegance in his technical gesture, in his communication, and in his humanity. I've been blessed in my lifetime to work with many great conductors and many great musicians across musical genres, and there are traits that they all have in common. Their love of their art, their curiosity about their craft, their love and their pursuit of knowledge about that craft, and their abilities to be ambassadors or advocates for that art in conversations and in beyond. Alan possessed all of those traits. He loved music. You knew he loved music. He cared about every detail of the score. He studied the score. When he approached a piece, he approached it as if it was the first time he had ever seen it, and you knew it wasn't. Of course he had conducted the Verdi Requiem, Messiah, St. Matthew Passion, and Elijah before, but he approached it with fresh eyes. That's the mark of a great artist. He reviewed all the new scholarship about it, but that scholarship was in service of the composer's desires, not his own. He served the text and the composer. He never put his ego or his voice above what he thought the intent of the composer was, whether it was Bach, Verdi, William Grant Still, Mendelssohn, Higdon, or Clearfield. Each and every composer deserved to be respected. Alan was a giant in the field, and over the years, like I said, I've been blessed to perform with many great conductors, but I count Alan on that list of great conductors. I refer to him as a quiet giant. He possessed immense talent, influence, and strength, but he operated with profound humility, rarely seeking the spotlight. He was a performer who transformed lives from within through consistent, high-quality work rather than loud self-promotion. He was an artist with a collaborative spirit. You could trust him on and off the podium. He was the same in rehearsal as he was in performance. I never saw him have an artistic outburst. You could rely on him to be the same wherever he was in any given situation. He took care of you. He believed in you. He cared about you as a person. He knew who you were and what things were happening in your life. He would reach out to check on you, to see how you were doing. He was unfazed about the really high things in your life, or if you were going through a hard time, he treated you the same. I remember when he wrote to me when we were about to do the Mendelssohn St. Matthew Passion, and how excited he was about that. And in the letter that he wrote to me, he said, "Now, listen, Marietta, I just want you to know that the mezzo doesn't get to do Erbarme dich. Will you still do it?" And I said, "Of course I will still do it." And when we had the rehearsals, the first rehearsal, and the soprano was singing, he kept looking over at me. "Are you okay?" And in the performance, I mean, I love the piece so much, and I'm a crier, and she was singing it, and I was crying, and he looked over, and he was like, "Okay." "Totally fine, Alan, I'm totally good." When I made the transition into academia about 21 years ago, I reached out to Alan, and he coached me through the negotiations. I will miss his voice as I continue through the future transitions in my life, but I will remember our times together, and I will always be grateful for the opportunity to have known not only a great musical giant, but a great human who invested not only in me, but in each of you, in the Mendelssohn Club, and in the many, many composers whose music will live on way past each of us. His legacy will endure for generations.
When Alan would give us a sneak preview on the next season, it was so varied. And we were going to be so busy, and it was going to be exciting. It just never failed. I loved the Verdi Requiem concert. I've played that CD into the ground. I loved every time we sang Elijah, because that was like our piece as Mendelssohn Club. I loved doing Belshazzar's Feast.
I always loved doing Foray and Duraflay with him. Those both will always be in my mind.
The Verdi Requiem that we did for a big anniversary in the Academy of Music, that was an incredible performance.
I mean, his Verdi Requiem concerts were unbelievable. I mean, they were full of energy and innovation. What he would tend to do sometimes with those concerts is he would pair those huge masterworks with something that you wouldn't expect, right? So the one of those that stands out for me is this pairing that he did of Orff's Carmina Burana, which we sang many, many, many times. We still sing it all the time, with Bartók's Cantata Profana, which is almost never heard.
So my first performance was the Mozart Requiem paired with Chantusigna, the composition that was commissioned out of Beethoven's words. This was the first time I sang the Mozart Requiem, but it was, familiar kinds of music, and the other was new and interesting. And Alan played a lot with that sort of balance between things.
Alan had his own way of doing things. I didn't always agree with it. For example, he commissioned Roberto Sierra to write a fanfare to precede the Brahms German Requiem. And Alan's approach was to take it a tacca. That seemed very strange to me, but it was Alan's vision, and that is exactly what we did. It worked. It worked, despite my misgivings. Later in his time with us was the St. Matthew Passion, which he had spent all this time working over in London with Mendelssohn's edition.
Coming up with the idea to do St. Matthew Passion for his retirement was something that was important for him, and he really wanted to make this project work. He didn't want it to be just a magnificent work, but then he wanted it to make sense as his swan song. And I think that the Mendelssohn version of St. Matthew Passion was just perfect for him.
I have conducted several performances of the B minor Mass and the St. John Passion, but because of the extraordinary resources needed for the St. Matthew, have never had an opportunity to do that. And in some ways, I thought I should just stop here, you know. But we did have one more performance in the season, and then I went through a whole period and I thought, okay, for my last piece, I'm going to do one of my standard repertoire masterworks that I love doing, like the Brahms Requiem or Mozart Requiem or something like that. But as I got closer to the final decision, I thought that more about what I consider my little mark on Mendelssohn Club's history, and that is our real concern and dedication to our mission of doing the masterworks, but of also doing new 21st century choral music by American composers. And I thought, no, take one more risk, you know, and do a new piece.
I'm Andrea Clearfield. It is one of my life's greatest joys to have collaborated with Alan Harler on pieces that he commissioned for Mendelssohn Chorus. I'm honored to have been one of the many composers that he commissioned and to have been asked to speak about that experience today. I knew Alan back in the 1980s when he conducted at the Aspen Music Festival. I was a student and sang under his baton. Later, he conducted some of my works. In 2003, I received a phone call from Alan the day after a premiere of a big work. He'd been in the audience. He'd like to discuss a new commission. Would I come meet him for tea in the Locust Street house where he and Chuck lived? The 1-hour meeting quickly turned into 4 as we sat for hours brainstorming about what this next piece could be. Alan brought up the idea of origin stories of different cultures. We talked about themes that could be interesting for a musical work. He gave me homework. Come back with as many ideas as you can about creation myths. He would do the same. I returned with my research for more tea and sparking conversation. Alan offered, what about a different kind of origin story, one about a man creating a creature with magic? We had both been to Prague, and we were intrigued by the mysterious golem story. We knew then that would be the piece. The Journey Through the Golem Psalms, a work for baritone soloists, chorus, and orchestra, with text by Alan Frankel, started a most meaningful and inspiring artistic relationship. Collaborating on the Golem Psalms, as with the other projects I worked on with Alan, was extraordinary. Alan enjoyed being a part of the process, listening to the piece in its raw form, if I agreed. He would come over and I would play it for him with the manuscript. Now, this is something that was unfamiliar to me. I was used to having the initial conversation with the commissioner and then spending long, solitary hours or months or years on the piece and then delivering it. But there was Alan in my living room listening to the piece with such delight as it unfolded. He wanted to be a part of the creative process. I was struck by his presence. He was so attentive. He listened deeply. He asked thoughtful questions. He wanted to understand the music. I was also struck with the sense of openness, always being open to the new. Could this work? Can we try this? What if? Working with Alan was about curiosity, generosity, and expansion, about possibility and what could be, questions that we would ponder together that I believe created more depth and meaning to the work. I trusted him. I was also struck by his brilliant and thoughtful programming, pairing masterworks with new works, both for practical reasons, using the same instrumentation for each, and also sharing a thematic relationship, such as the Golem Psalms, a Jewish legend, with the Ernst Bloch Sacred Service, or Tsego La, a piece about rites of passage, with the Fauré Requiem. This also allowed composers the possibility to create musical relationships. I would be remiss if I didn't mention his deep respect for the score, his meticulous preparation. Alan gained an impeccable knowledge and understanding of the new music that could then be conveyed to the singers and audience. I think it gave him great fulfillment to be immersed in the world of the piece. His all-in approach was so very similar to my own, and our collaboration led to a long-life friendship. Alan not only passed on his dedication and mission of commissioning the music of our day and the importance of this to his students, who have gone on to commission many new works in widening circles, greatly expanding the choral repertoire, but he also single-handedly built a new audience for contemporary choral music in Philadelphia. His excitement about what was new, what was on the edge, what could not only be presented, but also an experience that could be shared, engaging the audience, was contagious. Alan created a following of audience members who couldn't wait for the next new piece. There was a trust in Alan that he would be the guide for the next new adventures of the eyes, ears, and spirit. We take risks, he said, and now Dominic so beautifully carries that torch forward. Working with Alan was a highlight of my musical and personal life. I'm deeply grateful to Alan for believing in me and my work, and for nurturing and bringing forth the music of so many other living composers, enriching and expanding the music of our day, and all of us who were blessed to know him.
I came into Mendelssohn Club expecting to sing the great masterworks from the choral canon. The very first program that we did was a piece of new commissioned music, and I thought, what is this? As Alan took us through it, it became more and more part of my DNA, so that at the performance, I felt truly immersed in this work. And it was all because of Alan and the way he approaches introducing singers to new music and making them comfortable with it.
And he was very patient. You know, he didn't force or really lecture you about these things, but just let you experience it, and I think gave us time very patiently.
So supportive of all these composers and trying to make their music and make the world hear their music.
He's not afraid to think out of the box and to, allow works to happen that are immersive experiences, that are on all kinds of thematic material that matter to the chorus members, the way he conveys the music so that it draws everybody in, the chorus and the audience. He wanted to open up the audience to new sounds, new things. This became the new normal for the Mendelssohn Club.
The commissions, the young composers that Alan wanted to encourage, support, bring forth. Jennifer Higdon, the collaborations with the Leah Stein Dance Company, the Oliveras performance in West Philadelphia.
Battle hymns. I love the opportunity to be engaged for movement. The setting was gorgeous.
Not only commissioning and performing new music, but finding perfectly wonderful places to sing it in that nobody else had been in.
And the horse was a big surprise to all of us. But Alan was innovative in that way, I think, you know.
And of course, the Pulitzer Prize winning piece by Julia Wolf, Anthracite Fields, again, a collaboration with the Leah Stein Dance Company. Alan brought all of that together.
You have Alan, who's a really wonderful musician and conductor who's connected to the choir. And then you have these 6 musicians who are also incredibly virtuosic, can be somewhat self-sufficient, but they have to stay together. So I think there's going to be some kind of conversation, like they're looking at Alan, they're following his beat, but Alan's in some sense following them. But until you put it together, you don't know how will it be together.
He did take risks. He took risks again and again and again, but he had no ego about it. It was not about taking a risk because he wanted to do something crazy or do something that was wild. It was because he wanted to do something meaningful, and he wanted to provide a meaningful experience for the chorus, for the audience, and it was never about him. He would take on these projects that were so unusual and so, you know, just out there. To have an entire chorus out, you know, in front of the art museum singing Turbine, which was sort of an aleatoric work combined with the dancers, was, I mean, with a person on a boat singing in the Schuylkill River. I mean, who would have taken that on?
This is pretty high on the riskometer. We've taken Mendelssohn Club on a lot of adventures and a lot of new ideas. I know of no other piece for large chorus that is outside along the water.
Leah, Alan, and I were able to have really hearty laughs together, and it's like, oh yeah, I can work with these guys, right?
Our collaboration has been a real dialogue. And also, you know, pulling a little, you pull like, well, I'm thinking this, well, I'm thinking that.
Like knowing that all of us are committing to this like enormous, like, whoa, this is really scary. I'm keen on jumping into scary places, and yet I feel really, really secure.
I was just so grateful that I could be part of that kind of music making.
I mean, to be able to commission, what is it, 57 or 58 new works, including by two or three Pulitzer Prize winners, is pretty impressive in 27 years.
I think it was Stravinsky who said the greater the risk, the better chance there is of high art, you know.
I'm Rebecca Thornburg, soprano 2. Grateful, soprano 2. I was a singer with Mendelssohn Club Chorus from 2003 to 2022, and I'm now proud to support Mendelssohn Chorus as an alumna singer. I served as interim managing director from 2009 to 2010, and then interim executive director, I got a promotion, for 6 months in the first half of Alan's final season with Mendelssohn Chorus. I was really honored to serve my beloved Mendelssohn Chorus in those roles, and I'm truly honored and privileged to have been invited to offer some remarks today. My time working with Alan was a dream, an experience of a lifetime. He was brilliant, thoughtful, imaginative, iconoclastic, funny, kind, and ever patient, ever interested and invested. In that first time as managing director, I was a little nervous. When I was up for against a submission deadline for an important grant, he was always willing to call me to talk about it from his car at 10 o'clock at night on the way home from a long day of teaching at Temple. I was tired. He didn't seem to be. Or after a nerve-wracking 2-hour meeting with grant officers questioning us intensely about the specifics of some weird project, he was still up for going to a coffee shop to perch on a counter stool for about an hour, both of us soaking wet from a downpour because we didn't have umbrellas, just to talk more about these great future ideas. He was never too busy, never too tired, always a delight, always ready to see the silly side of anything. And he was always interested in knowing my thoughts about an idea. This brilliant visionary artist, someone who also wanted to know what my ideas were. So one thing I especially loved about Alan, he really thought I was somebody special. Right? Feels good. Especially that this magnificent person made me feel that way. But what's really funny about my having that sense is that Alan thought everybody was special. Everybody. Each of you sitting here in this place today and watching from home. If you knew Alan, you know that feeling. You remember those moments when he made you feel that you were very special, appreciated, distinctive, and he made you feel like you made a difference to him and to the world. So it was a bit of a challenge for our committee to come up with a name for this section in the program, what to call it. We tried some words and they didn't really work. But the wise Jeff Cornelius, Temple colleague, longtime friend of Alan's who was unable to be with us today, sadly, said this in his remarks at the celebration event at Temple in January, and we decided it couldn't be better said. Profoundly beautiful. Alan was a profoundly beautiful human being. That's just the truth. So, echoing Ellie's poignant words from the beginning of our program today, Alan was not only a magnificent artist, but pure and simple, he was a man of tremendous integrity, kindness, depth, and dignity. It's said that we keep our loved ones alive by saying their names and telling stories about them. And I know, of course, that all those of us who loved Alan will certainly do this. The stories will not stop. We will not stop talking about him. But I want to add to that an idea that in honoring Alan's memory as you leave here today, you might consider how he made each person he knew feel that they were special to him. Keep Alan's memory alive by yourself embodying the warmth, understanding, and appreciation that Alan had for everyone he knew. Alan, you will always be someone very special.
I'm Chuck Kalick, Alan's partner. At the time of Alan's passing last June, we had been together for 38 years. There's a time in one's life when the love that you've been waiting for finally arrives. And Alan and I knew at the moment we met, there was no doubt in our minds that we were going to be together. Loving each other, taking care of each other during good times and bad. This is my life with Alan. Not all 38 years, but I have 4 short stories to share. How we met, a Feast of Carols, AIDS, and just more information about Alan. How we met. The year was 1987. I was 37, Alan was 47. We met at a party at Alan's house on Locust Street. When I entered the party, we immediately locked eyes and smiled at each other across the room, as if we already knew each other. There was something extremely familiar about Alan, and we both felt the same way. When I was leaving the party, he asked me if he could come visit my studio sometime. A couple days later, he arrived with some of his friends. I guess they were his support group. He later told me that he brought friends with him because he was really nervous about being alone with me. Really? But after he looked at my work, and as he was about to leave, he said that he'd like to see me sometime. Then he told me that he was leaving the country the next day for a year-long sabbatical in Europe. It's true. Of course, we didn't know each other, so we weren't communicating with each other during that year. Time passed, and one day Alan knocked on my door. He said he was in Chestnut Hill for a meeting and thought he would stop by on the chance that I was home. He asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. Back then, he was driving a 1979 bright yellow Honda Civic. Now, at this point, I hardly knew anything about Alan. But I knew one thing for certain. I was going on that ride. After all, I did wait a year for him to come find me. He was definitely a man of his word. He said he wanted to see me, and a year later, he came back to see me. We drove to Valley Green, and when he brought me home, he asked me out on our first date together for that evening, dinner and a movie in town. After the movie, we went back to his house and talked for a while. I lost track of the time, and suddenly I realized it was getting late, and it also started to rain. And I told Alan, I don't feel comfortable about driving home in the rain at night because the East River Drive can get very slippery. That was a little slippery in itself. Yeah. But anyway. Actually, what I was really thinking was I just wanted to stay there and hug him. Then he excused himself and went to make a phone call. I could hear some of what he said. He said, I have a guy here that I really like, and he's concerned about driving home in the rain at night. And then I heard Alan say, what should I do? I thought it was sweet that he was so insecure about dating. But then he returned to the living room. He told me he had just called Tommy, a close friend living in New York. And Tommy told him that under the circumstances, I shouldn't be driving home, and that Alan should invite me to spend the night. Then Tommy said it a little more aggressively. Tommy said, honey, you better ask him to spend the night because you don't need another friend. As it turned out, I didn't drive home. I ended up spending the night, and that was the start of our 38 years together. All it took was one date, and the next morning I moved in. Fast mover. Then in 2013, we were married legally. Second story is Feast of Carols. When I attended the Feast of Carols concerts conducted by Alan, he would always send me a message during the performance. He would turn around and face the audience to conduct a carol. We would find each other. We would lock eyes. He would smile and wink, and I would wink back. Then with his arms raised, he would tap his index finger just enough so that I would notice that we were connecting. He was sending me a simple message. He was conveying 3 little words to me that he has said to me many, many times over. And those 3 little words, and those 3 little words were, "Do not sing." It's true. It's true. This started in the beginning of our relationship. One day, I was in the studio painting and listening to music and singing. Alan liked to watch me paint. He would come into the studio every once in a while. And this day, he walked into the studio as I was singing, and that was a big mistake. He immediately stopped in his tracks, he froze, and he looked over at me, and he said, "Oh, dear, darling, you can't sing." And I looked over at him and I said, "Oh, dear, and darling, you can't paint." So basically, the "do not sing" message simply became a sweet little joke between us. All he needed to do was just look at me, smile, wink, and along with the silent "do not sing" message was a message of endearing love that I could see in his face. Third story is AIDS. During the AIDS epidemic, Alan felt the need to volunteer and offer his help. He got in touch with Action AIDS. He was trained to be an AIDS buddy. He was assigned a number of clients. Alan's last client was a poor young man named Kenny who was living alone in North Philly in a very dangerous neighborhood. Kenny was afraid to go out of the house because of the gunfire he was always hearing. Alan provided Kenny with emotional support, companionship, going on errands, having lunch together, and going to medical appointments. AIDS buddies supported patients so that they knew they were not alone and that there was someone out there who cared about them, especially when their families abandoned them because of the disease. It was really a very sad situation. At one point, Alan went to Taiwan to work with the Taipei Philharmonic. One night, Alan called me and told me Kenny had just called him and told him that he was in Einstein Hospital and that he was scared and cold and needed another blanket. Alan reminded Kenny that he was in Taiwan and that he would get in touch with me to bring Kenny the blanket. I went to Einstein and asked the nurse on Kenny's floor to put the blanket on Kenny's bed and tell him that Alan sent it. Alan returned from Taiwan in time to be in Kenny's hospital room by his side, comforting him as he died. He also attended the funeral. Last part is more about Alan, just miscellaneous stories. Other than his music, one of Alan's achievements, actually a very significant achievement in his life, was his sobriety. Alan was 41 years sober when he passed. He was committed to his recovery and went to AA meetings practically every day. With the help of sponsors and friends in the program, he was able and determined to turn his life around. It truly was a great achievement. If it wasn't for AA, we might never have heard the wonderful music he was able to focus on and create, or enjoy the person that he became, the person that we loved. Alan loved family. He was a devoted son to Mother June and Father John, a devoted brother to Jack, and a devoted uncle to his nieces Becky and Susan and their families. He was also a godfather to Phelan Yu. He was a fearless and adventurous man. The most adventurous and brave thing he did was to marry me. He truly was a brave man. He loved to bike, he loved to hike. When he worked in Aspen, he would roll out of bed first thing in the morning, grab a cup of coffee, and then hike in the Rockies before starting his workday. He also enjoyed whitewater rafting, kayaking and camping in Alaska, going on safaris when he taught in South Africa. Swimming, yoga, he could do a great headstand, really. He could hold it forever. It's amazing. Going to the gym, traveling with or without me, our Shelties, dining and hanging out with friends. He loved a great burger with fries. He loved eating hot dogs at the Phillies games. Now, I'm not really sure if it was the game or the hot dog that he liked, but if I had to bet on it, I would bet on the hot dogs. He enjoyed watching the Eagles games, and he taught me everything about the game. And most of all, he loved walking on the beach with me, and also with friends, either in Brigantine, New Jersey, or the beach in South Beach, Florida. Now, here's something that might surprise you about Alan. He loved to dance. He even took lessons at the Arthur Murray Dance Studio. His favorite dance music wasn't classical. The music that he loved to dance to was disco. And we would go to dance parties in the city, and when we were in South Beach, we would go out to the discos. We loved dancing together. Now, I don't think we were really very good, but it was just great to disappear into the crowd on the dance floor where no one cared who you were, and where we also had the freedom to be ourselves. We were good partners on the dance floor and great partners in life. It was a partnership filled with love, passion, creativity, constant joy, and supporting and caring for each other. We were blessed to have found each other. I would like to thank the committee for putting together this wonderful celebration. I would also like to thank Dominic Dioro, the artistic director and conductor of the Mendelssohn Chorus, and all of Alan's wonderful singers and students, past and present. I would also like to thank everyone who shared their stories today, and I would also like to thank Temple University for the memorial service they had for Alan. And most of all, I'd like to thank Alan. And most of all, I'd like to thank Alan for stopping by my house on October 10th, 1987, and asking me if I wanted to go for a ride. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. That was beautiful. My name is Flo Gardner, and I'm the Executive Director of Mendelssohn Chorus. Like quite a few of you, my relationship with Alan began in Temple's concert choir. One of my first truly memorable experiences was singing Ravel's Daphne et Chloe with the Philadelphia Orchestra in the late 90s. And after that, I was hooked, and I've been part of the Mendelssohn Club, now Chorus family, ever since. But it wasn't until I started my professional career as an arts administrator that I came to see Alan for what he truly was, a visionary. To say that it is an honor to carry on his legacy is an understatement, something that is deeply felt within Mendelssohn Chorus's DNA, with our board, our singers, and everyone that comes across us. He is present in everything that we do. This gathering is exactly, I think, what Alan would have wanted. Beautiful music, beautiful people, a room full of voices, and some laughter. We are so grateful for Alan's family for being here with us today, and for Chuck and his kind words and beautiful memories. I think he'd be very pleased. We also want to thank everyone who's with us on Livestream. Last time I checked, I think there was 100 people on there, so thank you for joining us. It is a testament to the lives that Alan has touched. Following our next choral work, we invite you to continue the celebration at a reception in Parish Hall, which you can get to by walking straight out these doors and making a right, and you just walk down the pathway and you'll see some red doors on your right. I also want to thank board chairs Ellie Elkington and Charlotte Sibley, and former board treasurer Tom Elkington for hosting this wonderful reception in honor of Alan. Before you go, I also want to share one way that you can carry on Alan's legacy. The Alan Harler New Venture Fund was established at Mendelssohn Chorus in his honor, supporting bold choral programming, major commission works, and innovative collaborations for years to come. We invite you to consider being part of that future. Finally, our deep gratitude goes to Reverend Eric Music Director Andy Catoyo, and the entire community of St. Paul's Episcopal Church for opening their home for us today. In addition to all the singers and donors and committee members whose generosity made today possible, I also want to give a special thank you to Rebecca Thornburg and Rich Tolsma, who truly burned the midnight oil bringing together these wonderful photos and videos you've seen today. Thank you all again for joining us today in honor of a truly incredible man. Thank you.